Part 3 of the book of Psalms today, and this is Psalms 51 to 75. This will take us to halfway through the book of Psalms, it happens. We open with Psalm 51. This is David's apology to God after one of the significant adultery incidents. And it talks interestingly about David is deliberately not sacrificing to God because, as his apology, because that will bring God no pleasure. And it talks about his sacrifice is his broken and contrite heart for what he did. It's interesting. God seems kind of happy with this. I sense that God is quite happy with David on the big overall scheme. Doesn't seem too bothered about the consequences to other people, which, I mean, there's a justice problem there, isn't it? Because if you recall, was it Bathsheba, I think, oh, so many wives, got the guy killed so that he could marry the lady. So, a guy's dead. It's pretty serious impact of his sin on other people. So it's difficult to know what to do with that, but it does seem to allude to this whole idea that David's enthusiasm for God is actually more appealing to God. Something like that. It's difficult to tell. Psalm 53, this is another one written by David. He talks about fools who say there's no God, but it doesn't seem to be talking about atheists in this sense. It seems like in this you're either a follower of God, or you are a follower of some other sort of God, whether it's idols or whatever. And that's an interesting idea, that I think. There are no atheists, it seems, or there are no prominent atheists pulled out in this. I do wonder if that gives an idea, because I've long had this idea that the idols potentially are not real idols. So like the golden calf, for example. I don't know why a calf, but a calf could be a symbol of prosperity and wealth and all the rest of it. So is that worshipping wealth as sort of a false aim in life? So something like that. I don't know. And but I did, when I had that meeting with that vicar, I had on the list to ask him about whether or not the references to idols were actually metaphorical. They're not actually suggesting other gods, they're just suggesting other priorities in life, but I didn't get around to doing that. So I've still got to figure that one out, but it does seem like that would be a reasonable idea. Psalm 62, there's lots of talk of God being people's refuge, and there's a quote, "You reward everyone according to what they have done." Similar idea that explored in the first of the Psalms videos, that had a theme, a pattern there, talking about attributing stuff, and it just doesn't seem to be borne out in real life. So I don't know. You reward everyone. I know 2 vicars who died of cancer, so granted that could be the reward, you got to go to heaven early, but then there are really good people who are made to live to old age, and I don't know, it's irritating when people of this biblical time attribute things that just don't seem to fit, and there's inconsistency, and it's almost like it would all be better off if we didn't have that in there, and it just seems a little bit misguided. I don't know. I'm not picking at the Bible, obviously, but makes it tricky to read. Psalm 63, "Your love is better than life," David says in this one, which again, I guess that seems to be music to God's ears, and it would make sense if God is real and did create all this and has said these things, that's what he wants, then yeah, I guess that would make sense. That would be the thing he wanted most. I suppose that alludes to the impressive thing of David, that he was so enthusiastic about it on the assumption that he didn't have proof that it was true. I guess it sounds like he had proof that it was true, but was it talking in dreams, that sort of thing? So I don't know, because you don't get to be certain with Christianity, do you? I'm not saying... there's that idea that faith is devoid of doubt, which I don't think is true. I think that's perfectly reasonable that you can have faith and there could be some doubt. It does seem to be, to some extent, the test is, can you hold your faith in God despite that doubt, which necessarily requires that there is scope for doubt, i.e. God doesn't turn up and go, "Hi, I'm here," and prove that he's around. So, yeah, don't know. A lot of don't know. Psalm 64, again, David, "All people will fear, they will proclaim the works of God and ponder what he has done." This seems to be referring to some sort of end times type of thing. What in the Bible so far tells us that is the case. I just haven't seen that so far in the Bible. I get that will be addressed in the New Testament, but we're not there yet. Psalm 65 talks about "you who answer prayer," and it's another example of that stuff that isn't particularly helpful. because people have definitely asked for things that they haven't then got. So this is a difficult question in terms of the abstract thing of, when my aunt, who I mentioned previously, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and didn't live very long after that, there was a lot of prayer going into curing her, asking for a miracle and all the rest of it. And so that asking for a miracle for her to live was explicitly not answered in that respect. But could the prayer have been peace and something else? And it's... when my father was dying, his prayer was for, I would like to be healed if that is your will, but I will settle for being healed in a much broader sense, in terms of almost like being brought home to God sort of thing. So I guess in that respect, that his prayer perhaps was answered. So maybe you've got to be careful how you phrase it. Oh, it's very complicated stuff, isn't it? I don't know if I'm just absolutely making a massacre of it or not, but you can only read a book and see what you think. Psalm 68, again, David. It seems particularly odd, and there's reference to hairy crowns and wading in blood. All very doom, gloom and satanic sort of thing, but with no actual mention of Satan. So I don't know if people are actually aware of the existence of Satan at this point. Because Satan, it was said in, I think it was Chronicles, that he had an influence on David that got him in trouble with God. But there's no sort of sense that David was aware of this. And obviously Satan turned up again in Job, but it's not a true story. So it's not a literal story. So that doesn't really help us either. But it's an interesting idea. Just, no one's mentioned Satan yet. Psalm 73 is the start of book 3, which has the theme, it seems to be, of worship, basically. These do seem to be sort of fairly rough themes, because there's a huge amount of worship in book 2 as well, and book 1. So, yes, not quite obvious why this division is there, but as I mentioned, because that's what we're passing. There's a few quotes from this, and there's talk about, this is not David, so book 3, book 2 largely written by David, book 1 largely written by a lot of David, not so much David in book 3 anyway, whatever. It talked about envied the arrogant when I saw their prosperity. They have no struggles, their bodies are healthy, basically life isn't fair kind of complaint. And it talks about pride is their necklace, and it's all very sort of grim until it gets towards the end when it talks about, and then he came into the sanctuary of God and understood. I was like, what's the sanctuary of God? And what did you understand? Because you can't have written this after you died, clearly. So, yeah, I don't really know. I guess it's everyone wrestling with this stuff themselves. And what does it all mean? And, we see wicked people get away with stuff. And it's nice that that's acknowledged, I suppose, in that respect. And sort of looking back at a time of people who were in this stuff, clearly having the same sort of frustrations. But obviously they wrote a psalm, so it tends to end in quite a positive light. I don't know. These are tough, these things. So, again, mixed bag, some interesting ideas. Not quite sure what to do with them. But yeah, we will soldier on and see what we can find in the next lot.